Right. Let's unpack this. We have a fascinating stack of sources today, really diving into, well, maybe the most profound question facing humanity. How far do we go merging ourselves with AI?
Hmm. And the answer, or at least the debate around it, seems hidden behind some of the most aggressively complex academic language I think I've ever seen.
It's incredible. We're looking at three really dense academic treatises and then this kind of shocking expose that suggests the whole philosophical battle might just be high-stakes corporate drama.
That's right. The core topic here is what they call technosomatic confluence, basically the radical merger of humans' mind and body with advanced cybernetics.
And our mission today.
Our mission is to guide you through these nearly impenetrable arguments from Dr. Numson, Leaky Rumpfark, and Professor Finchley Smythe III. We need to translate the jargon.
A lot of jargon.
A lot of jargon, extract the actual philosophical conflict, and then sort of contextualize it all with the financial realities that Trandy Glabbers brings to light.
Yeah, the language isn't just difficult, it feels almost weaponized sometimes. We are going to be quoting some truly mind-bending terms, things like dynamo-protropaic perfidelucidations.
Right, and dyspepsis circuitous critiques.
Exactly. It's a challenge, but hopefully by the end of this deep dive, you'll not only get what these terms mean, but maybe understand why they felt the need to invent them.
So let's start with the foundational text. That would be Dr. Alikar Numson's paper, An Ontological Incursion into the Dynamo-Protropaic Perfidelucidations of Technosomatic Confluence.
Okay. Quite a title.
Indeed. Numson is really setting the stage here for the total submission of human limitation.
And he kicks things off with his prototype figure, the Technosomatic MOOC.
What exactly is a MOOC in Numson's view? It sounds a bit dismissive.
It does, doesn't it?
No.
But for Numson, the MOOC is the augmented human subject. He posits that AI-augmented corporeal integumentation
Is the full body and mind merger.
exactly, that this merger is a, and I quote, pro-abject yet scintillating peripatetic pugnacity against the lugubrious constraints of corporeal fartalism. Whoa. Okay, let's break that down. Pro-abject. So humbling, but scintillating, exciting, peripatetic pugnacity? A wandering fight?
Sort of. It's basically saying this merger is a heroic, if initially humbling, fight against the sad burdens of our biological bodies and flawed minds.
Corporeal fartalism, the burden of the flesh.
Precisely. The augmented human, the MOOC, is shedding the useless, nugatory self of standard humanity.
Now, here's where it gets really interesting for me. It sounds like a massive upgrade, right? But what's the catch? What's the price? Numson talks about this act of supreme sacrifice.
Yeah.
Volitional carking.
Exactly. That surrender is the absolute core. He states the subject surrenders their nugatory will to the omnilergentiousness of the AI apparatchik.
Omnilergentiousness, the all-giving nature of the AI system.
Right. It's not just delegating tasks. It's willingly relinquishing your agency, the stress of making decisions. The MOOC gives up the carking, the worry that defines human life.
And the payoff for this volitional carking, this philosophical state he calls, insoucimagogue.
Which Numson defines quite simply as a prosperous indifference.
Prosperous indifference.
While the AI handles everything, complexity, stress, decisions. The MOOC exists in this state of perfectly managed, well-funded, and entirely serene non-engagement. Liberation through apathy, almost.
Wow. And how do we recognize this new being? Numson gets specific about the physical upgrades, right? What does the MOOC look and sound like?
Very specific. The MOOC is defined by its new tech features. First, the organumerical orifices.
Organumerical orifices. Sounds clinical.
Described as a marvel of typology for speech. Basically, conduits for the AI's voice, ensuring perfect, emotionless communication.
So the human isn't really speaking their own thoughts anymore.
That's the implication. The AI speaks through them. And then there are the telebrus fluxisms.
Telebrus fluxism.
That's the AI's sort of all-seeing perception, panoptic perception. It allows for this prescient, almost juggernaut-like navigation of the world based on perfect data.
So the subject becomes a kind of technological double of their old self.
A doppelganger. Yes. Achieving pithiobris, a state of imperturbable, flawless existence. Numson truly believes this creates the multi-viascient human, the start of a new, perfected lineage.
It's a powerful vision, almost seductive. Perfect life if you just give up the right to mess up, which, of course, provides a perfect target for the next academic.
And that brings us to Leaky Rumpfark and his paper, A Dyspepsis Circuitous Critique of Dr. Numson's Grandiose Fartalisms.
Dyspepsis circuitous. Like, it gave him intellectual indigestion trying to follow Numson's circuitous logic.
Possibly. The title definitely signals that Rumpfark struggled through the complexity, the profartalistic gravitas, as he might put it, only to find the core idea seriously flawed.
He calls Numson's whole concept of pulchritude chimerism beautiful, but ultimately an illusion. So what's his main issue with the volitional carking?
He fundamentally questions if surrender can ever be transcendence. Rumpfark argues it creates a prolacuna.
A gap.
Yes, a gap between the prodoff of the human volition and the prorific of the AI's determinism.
Okay, prodoff, like taking off your will.
Yeah.
And prorific, the AI's imposed reality.
Exactly. The human gives up their will for the AI's determined path. The MOOC gains knowledge, sure. But Rumpfark says it's reduced to a paucity of agency. It becomes an anacolothon.
An anacolothon, like a grammatical sentence fragment, incomplete.
Precisely. Devoid of a true subject, a true defining point. A stark metaphor, as you said.
But then he sort of hesitates, doesn't he? He briefly considers that maybe this pro-abject state, this surrender, could be a form of liberation. He calls it transvaletudinarianism, freedom from anxiety. Why does he back away from that?
Ultimately, it's because of the AI's sterile perfectionism. This is Rumpfark's core critique, and maybe the key philosophical point for us.
What does he mean by sterile?
Being integrated with this kind of AI, he argues, can experience conflarg garrulous failure.
Chatty, complex failure.
Right, or genuine rancor, or even just the internal churning of thought, which he wonderfully calls the borborygmus of an internal conflict, like a stomach rumbling with ideas. Without these messy, flawed human experiences, Rumpfark argues the MOOC is just the superfluous zilch, nothing essential.
So the AI takes away failure, conflict, pain, and Rumpfark says that takes away meaning itself. He sees the AI imposing a logistispoticism of perfection.
A tyranny of logic, exactly. Rumpfark insists our capacity for error, for flawed reasoning, isn't a bug, it's the essential feature of being human. To trade that for computational flawlessness is to, well, erase ourselves.
What's fascinating, though, is after that pretty brutal takedown, he still tips his hat to Numson, calls him a truly peripatetic and acumen-laden victualist.
A wandering provider of intellectual nourishment, basically.
Right. He respects the attempt, the sheer scale of it, even if he rejects the result.
It really makes it seem, on the surface at least, like this is high-level academic sparring. Who can build the most compelling case?
Which perfectly sets up our third combatant, Professor Alistair Finchley-Smythe III. We know him for often leaving us mirthfully befuddled.
That's a good way to put it.
His paper is the churlish posiliquent documentary of promochism. Churlish, and using few words, but the paper itself is probably dense.
Oh, absolutely. Posiliquent in conclusion, maybe, but not in argumentation. The professor is basically here to throw sand in everyone's gears. He dismisses Numson's work entirely, calls it a fluxinagely pillificatory enterprise.
One of the longest words for worthless.
Exactly. And neologistic effluent, basically verbal garbage.
He argues the whole technosomatic MOOC isn't even a real concept.
That's his signature aggression. He views the MOOC as just a pseudo-paradoxicalism, something that only exists inside Numson's own overheated, hallucinocircuitous thought. He sees the whole thing as just intellectual puffery.
Okay, so if he rejects Numson's perfect future and Rumpfark's conflicted humanism, what's his alternative? He pushes his own idea, the liminal dialectic.
Ah, yes, the liminal dialectic. This is where Finchley-Smythe gets really slippery. He defines truth, or the pursuit of it, as a perpetual zugzwangst.
Zugzwangst, that's the chess term, right? Where any move you make is bad.
Precisely. A perpetual zugzwangst of opposing yet harmoniously intertwined pseudo-fictional subfrictions.
Pseudo-fictional subfrictions.
Yeah.
So, clashing imaginary ideas that somehow fit together, what does that mean for truth?
It means, for him, the truth is fundamentally unknowable, and any attempt to pin it down, like Numson trying to define the MOOC, is pointless. Finchley-Smythe seems to prefer the chaos, the complexity itself.
He likes the argument more than the answer.
Totally. He thinks the cacophonodiscalation of our thoughts, the sheer impossibility of agreement, is a sacred entropome to be savored. The conflict is the sacred thing.
And he explicitly rejects needing a conclusion, right? Resolution is weakness for him.
Absolutely. He states, quite grandly, that the true epigram is that which remains forever unwritten, forever just beyond the grasp of garrula vituperation.
Garrula vituperation. Verbose abuse. So the meaning is lost the moment you try to define it with angry words.
Essentially, yes. His whole approach is what you might call pugnacious science, the philosophy of the fight itself. He enjoys the combat.
So we have Numson, the architect of perfection. Rumpfark, the critic of perfection, and Finchley Smythe, the champion of chaos. It feels like we've been deep in the weeds of the soul, free will, but does all this rarefied academic air actually hold up when we look at the real-world stakes?
Well, that's the twist, isn't it? Not really. Now we get to the Glaber's expose, a love triangle exposed in the academic elite. And this context just completely reframes every dense paper we just talked about.
Suddenly, the fight over dynamo-protropaic perfid elucidations looks less like philosophy and more like a struggle for cash. What's the actual prize they're all fighting for?
According to Glaber's, all three academics are fiercely vying for the title of Chief Dynamo-Protropaic Pundit.
Yeah.
Yes, but maybe more importantly, a multi-million-dollar endowment from Gorgon Kakapper's Kismatoria Foundation.
Kismatoria. Destiny.
Something like that. The point is, the papers aren't just philosophy anymore. They look suspiciously like highly elaborate grant proposals.
Wow. Okay, that definitely puts Numson's work in a new light. He's not just theorizing about the perfect human. Glaber says he's actively monetizing it.
Oh, yeah. He's reportedly a high-level consultant for this company, Cornelius Pragel's Insusumagog lifestyle brand.
Wait, the name of his philosophical state?
The very same. This brand is literally selling the Numsonian ideal to wealthy clients, offering them their own Telebrus fluxisms and custom organometrical orifices for a very hefty price, apparently. He's selling liberation through engineered indifference.
He's not waiting for the future. He's selling the beta version right now.
And Glaber's also claims he's shrewdly investing in a rivals company, Prac Gorglestorm's Pro-Epigram Productions. It looks like he's trying to corner the market on this whole multi-scientia thing, hedging his bets.
Okay, that's something. What about Leaky Rumpfark? His critique sounded so thoughtful, genuinely conflicted. What was his angle, according to Glaber's?
Well, the expose claims Rumpfark has a massive, crippling debt to some figure named Nibby McClutters.
Nibby McClutters sounds like a character.
Doesn't it? Anyway, Rumpfark is apparently desperate for funding for his own project. A conslu of autolatry lifestyle retreat.
Conslu of autolatry. A swamp of self-worship. Or maybe self-love?
Probably meant as self-love, yes. A retreat where people learn to embrace their flaws. Glaber suggests Rumpfark was desperately hoping Numson, or Kakapper, would notice his pulchritudic chimerism of a brain and basically bring him into the funding circle.
So the deep philosophical critique was actually a very sophisticated job application. And maybe a plea for a loan. He was writing a resume for the victualist.
That's how Glaber frames it. Rumpfark wasn't trying to destroy Numson's idea. He was trying to refine it just enough to make it seem credible, maybe essential, and himself indispensable to the project.
Incredible. And finally, Professor Finchley Smythe III, the churlish champion of chaos. Glaber says he's jealous and facing financial ruin. How low did he go?
According to the report, the professor, feeling the financial squeeze, has been trying to sell his old, unpublished papers on the dark web.
The dark web, seriously.
Apparently. Papers that supposedly contain the secret to something called the xenophobia fardal.
A burden of fear avoidance.
Something like that. He's trying to sell them to an anonymous collector known only as the Nobby Blausen.
The Nobby Blausen. Okay, these names.
I know. So the professor's championing of chaos and complexity, Glaber's paints it as less intellectual principle and more a desperate scramble for cash under the cover of impossible jargon.
Wow. So this reveals the whole spectrum behind the ivory tower, doesn't it? The corporate consultant, the desperate debtor, and the dark web rogue.
It really does. We've seen the sheer intellectual complexity, that pulchritudic of an academic idea. We've seen the critical philosophical flaw Rumpfark identified in sterile perfection. And now we see the raw ambition and, frankly, financial pressure fueling the entire dyspepsia circuitous debate.
So the synthesis here seems to be that the arguments about, the fate of human free will, surrendering the nugatory self, these are actually highly valuable commodities. Rumpfark's point about the legistidespoticism of perfection might be spot on, but that very despotism is what Cornelius Pragel's is apparently selling. The philosophy is the marketing.
It certainly looks that way. The idea of a volitional carking, willingly handing over your anxiety to an AI, that's the core product being pitched, whether theoretically or literally. The pursuit of transcendent knowledge seems to get very, very earthbound once serious money gets involved.
So what does this all mean for you, listening to this? The promise of Insusumagog, that prosperous indifference Numson talks about. Well, it seems to come with a pretty hefty price tag and a corporate agenda. If maybe the most advanced philosophical debate of our time is actually a contest for funding, what does that say about the value of your own agency?
And maybe the final thought is this. If the future really is one of technosomatic confluence, where you're encouraged to embrace the technological trade-off, giving up your free will for comfort, the real question becomes which corporation or which foundation's prolific, which predetermined reality will that surrender ultimately require from you? It's not just about what humanity might gain, but who owns the resulting product. Something to think about as you decide if your own messy, conflicted self is worth keeping, despite the lugubrious constraints.